Unstable politics, slums, cartels, cheap raw materials. That is how most people picture South America. But what is happening on this faraway continent could decide the future of all of Europe, and it is happening right now. Rewind to February 2022. Russian tanks roll across Ukraine. The West expects the whole planet to condemn it. Instead, from South America, it hears mostly silence. Of the 12 biggest countries in the region, only 3 backed sanctions on Russia: Colombia, Chile, and Ecuador. The rest refused or hid behind empty talk about peace. That silence was not random. Step by step, with no noise at all, China had been building something huge. And here is the twist. The United States accidentally helped. Years of hardline pressure on Southern partners pushed the region away. Then America first finished the job, and China walked right into the gap. Today, Beijing controls over 60% of the world's lithium processing. It has cornered the supply chains for rare earth metals, the stuff inside every battery and every advanced chip. Look at the Chancay port in Peru, built almost from scratch with Chinese billions. Now a brand new trade hub. Container ships skip the Atlantic and sail straight into the heart of Latin America. The projections are brutal. If nothing changes, China becomes Latin America's #1 trade partner by 2035, and Europe gets pushed to the sidelines, paying more for everything. Here is why that should scare you. Europe is getting hooked on Chinese lithium and rare earth chains, which means Beijing could one day use that grip as an economic weapon. The symbolic turning point came in January 2023. At the CELAC summit in Buenos Aires, 24 of the region's 33 countries formally joined China's Belt and Road Initiative. The numbers say it all. Brazil now ships 80% of its soy to China. Argentina started settling deals in yuan, and Peru handed China control of its largest port. For these countries, it was simple: money with no lectures attached. For the United States, it was the loss of dominance built over half a century. But the game is not over yet, because global rivalry now works like a series of sprints. Whoever falls behind drops out of the race, and Europe is falling behind. To understand why, look at how this region actually runs. The politics here move like a sprint too. Governments change like a kaleidoscope. Decisions get made under the pressure of the next crisis and the next election. Long-term plans collapse at the first shift in public mood. Argentina's new president slashes the budget overnight. Brazil's government tests the limits of democracy with disputed court reforms, and Chile debates stripping power from its own presidency. In Colombia, waves of protest topple unpopular politicians. Bolivia sells strategic company stakes to the Chinese. Peru and Paraguay teeter on the edge of chaos. Every contract can vanish with the next election. Now forget the tired myths, because this continent will surprise you. Start with people. Chile and Uruguay are aging fast. Fewer young workers, rising pension and care costs. But Venezuela and Ecuador are booming with youth. Millions of 20 and 30-somethings flood the job market. They launch startups, fill co-working spaces, and build digital schools. Europe keeps seeing them as migrants or cheap labor. That is a mistake. This young generation could be a partner in science and tech, not just a workforce to import. And here is the fact that breaks the poverty myth. Nearly 300 million South Americans now belong to the middle class. That is more than China and India combined. In Brazilian favelas that were slums a decade ago, most people now live a middle-class life. Their incomes look low to us, but locally, they buy a comfortable life. That is a giant wave of consumers, and the region is turning from an economic backwater into a laboratory of new tech. Green hydrogen flows out. Brazil recycles batteries. Peru exports smart aquaculture. Colombia bets big on telemedicine. A quiet energy revolution is underway. Wind turbines spin on Andean peaks. Solar panels blanket the pampas. Ecuador taps geothermal heat. South America is no longer just a supplier of raw materials. Even the tiny countries matter. Little Suriname has basically become an economic protectorate of China, which poured money into bauxite mining, a foothold between Brazil and the Atlantic, facing Europe. Paraguay is called the world capital of smuggling. Around 40% of its economy is off the books. Cigarettes and goods pour illegally into markets, including the EU, and stable little Uruguay runs bold experiments. It was the first country in the world to fully legalize marijuana, and now European governments watch closely as they weigh the same move. But the most urgent story here is human. Venezuela was once one of the richest countries in the region. Then it collapsed. No food, no medicine, political repression everywhere. Over 8 million Venezuelans have fled, a full quarter of the entire country. Most ran to Colombia, Peru, and Ecuador, and eventually, that wave reached Europe. In recent years, Venezuelans became the largest group seeking asylum in the European Union, ahead of even Syrians. And Poland feels it, as more arrive through the African and Mediterranean route. Now here is where it gets darker. Organized crime casts a long shadow. Drug cartels run billion-dollar budgets, infect the legal economy, and drive some of the highest murder rates on Earth. And most cocaine from Colombia and Peru no longer flows to the United States. It flows to Europe. Dozens of tons a year cross the Atlantic. Ports in Belgium, the Netherlands, and Spain break seizure records. There is also a war for minds. Russian and Chinese propaganda channels paint the West every day as cynical hypocrites who only want your resources. On Brazilian TV, experts from Moscow warn that Europeans and Americans are just the next colonizers. In Mexican cities, Chinese billboards promise trade with no lectures about values. So young Latin Americans eye Washington and Brussels with suspicion. Moscow and Beijing look like friends with no conditions. Even vaccines and Amazon rescue funds get met with distrust. And speaking of the Amazon, its future is your future. Deforestation for farming and logging is already scrambling the local climate. Droughts dry the rivers, then violent downpours wash away the soil. If this green shield loses its power to absorb CO2, we all feel it. Faster warming, wilder weather, falling harvests across the whole planet. For locals, it is an existential threat. Then comes the move that could reshape global power. Latin American countries and their Asian partners are building payment systems that dodge the dollar and the euro entirely. A shared BRICS platform now lets Brazil, China, India, and others settle billions in local currencies, skipping Western banks. A Brazilian coffee exporter sells to China without a single American cent. For Europe, that is a loud warning. If our firms are locked out of this new financial loop, they could pay more or lose whole markets to buyers with easier deals. Now stack up the raw scale. China's trade with the region is around $520 billion a year. Europe's trade with all of it, just 300 billion euros. Beijing is the top partner of every single country, no exceptions. At one conference, China's leader offers $9 billion in credit. No conditions, no lectures on human rights or climate. Meanwhile, Europe has failed for 26 years to finalize its Mercosur trade deal. The pattern repeats everywhere. Brazil needed a port. China just built it. Europe would have offered another feasibility study. When Chile hit an energy crisis, a Russian firm delivered a reactor. When Argentina desperately needed credit, India simply put up the cash, while the EU demanded a financial audit first. To local leaders, Beijing brings solutions. Brussels brings conditions. And this hits home harder than you think. Poland's KGHM invests in Chilean copper mines. Polish battery plants, the biggest in the EU, wait on lithium from Bolivia and Argentina. In August 2024, a strike at Chile's Escondida mine halted production. Copper prices jumped almost instantly. Polish car makers felt it fast, in pricier parts and pricier electric cars. And the irony stings. Poland itself blocked the Mercosur deal, fearing cheap beef and soy from Argentina and Brazil, protecting farmers, but risking Europe's access to the metals its industry needs. So what can Europe actually offer? Chinese money is fast, but it often hides the bill. Debt, lost control of ports and mines, first pick for Chinese firms. Europe can be the opposite of that. Clear terms, real technology transfer, respect for workers and the environment without grabbing local resources. But it has to move fast. Faster grants, real trade missions, boots on the ground in every country. Because the truth is simple. In this century, whoever controls the raw materials controls development. And the world is changing right now. Without asking Europe for permission, there are no faraway problems anymore. Sooner or later they become yours. South America is not waiting. It is building its future with whoever pays today. This is the last moment to grab a seat at the table before the door closes for good.